Slavery is back.
Welcome to a place where private business profit from a captive labour force, yet pennies are spent on medical services to a population in which the Indigenous, the poor and the mentally ill are overrepresented. Where isolation, humiliation and degradation are facts of life. Welcome to prison.
It depends who's telling the story, I suppose. The prisoners would have one view, the people who work in the prison system would have another, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin' Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin' Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. Sorry, 855 AM on the dial. And this particular show is dedicated to George Floyd, who is a black African-American who died in custody in America. And as America readies for a sixth night of protests over the recent police killing of this unarmed black man, the hurt and anger is being felt on Australian soil. And, yeah, there's been a lot of media coverage about this, and so we've chosen to dedicate the show to all deaths in custody and also to David Dungay. And I'm going to be speaking shortly with Joseph Pugliese, who is a friend of Uncle Ray Jackson, who passed away some years ago now and who is still remembered. And we're going to be speaking with him just about what happened in America and also how that's being felt here in Australia, and looking also at David Dungay and the similarities of both deaths. Tens of thousands of people took to the streets in the US, both peacefully and violently, to protest the death of Floyd, a Minnesota man who died in police custody on Monday, and the others who came before him. So that's just a bit of an example of what the media is writing. Not sure what they mean by violence, given that there's been a lot of violence by the police who actually, stood on the neck of George Floyd, and all of those police have been fired. There's been one police officer who has been charged, and the others have yet to be charged. There's a lot of outrage going on here. A lot of media coverage. There's one particular article by Amy Maguire, which people might be interested in looking at as well, but I'll talk about that later. So Joseph Pugliese is first, and then after that we're going to be speaking with Mitch from the Refugee Action Collective, and we're going to be speaking with him about Serco and how basically art supplies are being denied to a refugee who is in detention. So we'll look at that. And then after that, we're going to speak with Brett Collins from Justice Action in New South Wales. And we'll be speaking with Brett about also George Floyd and also deaths in custody. And, yeah, just to say also that Joseph is also in New South Wales. He's done a lot of work on the deathscapes website, and we've done a lot of coverage on that as well. So coming up very soon is Joseph.
Fitzroy Legal Service has launched a free information and advice phone service for people who have been stopped, questioned, fined or charged for breaching the new COVID-19 restrictions. Have you been fined or charged under the new laws? Or stopped and questioned by police for being outside?
Call 0434 136 501. Weekdays between 9am and 5pm. That's 0434 136 501. Or head to fitzroy-legal.org.au for more information. You can also report incidents at covidpolicing.org.au.
Fitzroy Legal Service is a 3CR supporter.
And you're back with the Doing Time show. So before we actually speak with Joseph, just a quick reminder that the station appeal is coming up for 3CR. And, of course, because of the pandemic, COVID-19 and the lockdown restrictions, we have been unable to do Radiothon, and I know that people are doing it really tough, but we actually do really need people to donate online during station appeal, which will be for this month, and details of that will be played shortly, and I'll talk about that later on in the program. But please, people who can afford it, dig deep and donate to the Doing Time show and also to other 3CR programs. Hello, Joseph. Welcome to the program.
Hello, Marissa.
It's lovely to have you.
Lovely to be here.
Now, Joseph, I'm wondering if you could start off talking a little bit about George Floyd and also talk about some of the far-reaching issues, if you like, in regards to David Dungay.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I guess what is so powerful about the death of George Floyd is the transnational connections that we need to make and the way in which they resonate back in the Australian settler state context. So we'll get to that. But I think when you watch the video, when you're compelled to watch the video of George Floyd being murdered by the police, what strikes you is just the overwhelming brutality of police power and violence on someone. If you've watched the video, it goes for about 8.5 minutes, who at no time is actually violent themselves, acting in any reactive way to call for that undue pressure and duress that he was placed under, that utter subjugation. He's quite compliant, in fact, all along the way, except in the initial stages where he's not wanting to get into the car because he says he suffers from claustrophobia. But once you see him brought to the ground and you've got people, bystanders, filming the event, you see his relentless plea for the knee to be removed precisely because he can't breathe. And he calls out about 16 times that he can't breathe, and still the knee is placed on his neck, obstructing his lungs, and he's face down, and so his lungs are obstructed from breathing. So it's like a double whammy, and he's undergoing asphyxiation. And I think the most gut-wrenching moment for me is, and I'm not sure if you've seen it or heard it, but toward the end, in utter desperation, he actually calls for his mama.
Yes.
He says, "Mama, Mama," quite a few times. And for me, that's the sense that he's got no one to call but his mother to come and help him from this desperately fatal situation. And of course, the brutality is amplified by the utter indifference of that police officer who keeps his hands in his pockets and completely looks nonplussed, complacent about the death that's occurring underneath his knee, effectively. And the fact that he keeps his hands in his pocket, it makes it seem as though this is a routine, everyday event in his life. And do you know what? It is. I've investigated Chauvin, the white police officer's background, and apparently he's had 17 complaints lodged against him, and he's been also complained about with one fatal shooting. So there's a record there, and what's significant there is that in the US system, and this sort of connects back to the Australian system, and Uncle Ray would certainly want us to make these connections, there's something called qualified immunity, which basically means that police officers can get away with murder and hardly ever be charged or convicted for what they do. Now, that resonates powerfully with the David Dungay case, and we can talk about that in a moment, but I'll stop there just to let you come in on the conversation, Marissa.
No, this is perfect, Joseph, and I was hoping that you would indeed speak about David Dungay as well, because that is terribly important.
Yeah. Look, I actually want to speak about David Dungay by framing it within the larger national context and then making those transnational connections about things like qualified immunity. Sure. And I want to read to your listeners a quote from Professor Bronwyn Castle, who you've had on your program, who's Professor of Indigenous Studies, Head of Indigenous Studies, a colleague of mine at Macquarie. And just yesterday she tweeted this, and I'm quoting now, "Watching the US demonstrations against unlawful killings of black and Indigenous people by police. Australian journalists have to do better. What the fuck comments that in Australia we don't understand what race hate and police brutality means. Just outrageous." And I think Bronwyn was referring specifically to the fact that the Australian media is covering this as though it's some grotesque, abnormal thing that happens over in the US, only in America, and not here. And you can see the way in which the Australian reporters are actually framing it as something anomalous in terms of the Australian context. I'm not sure if you saw the Channel 9 reporter who interviewed one of the protesters, and she basically said, when the protester says, "This country was built on violence," she says, "Oh, I really appreciate you giving perspective because people in Australia don't have the understanding of the history of police killings here."
Oh, my.
That's the quote from the reporter, Alexis Daish in West Hollywood.
Yes.
Now, that's where I think David Dungay comes in, and that's where the 420-odd deaths in custody that we've had since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody have to be framed. And we have to begin to say, how is it that these deaths continually get erased so that the violence, not only the colonial violence that happened in the past, but which is ongoing in its racialised effects with the extraordinary amount of incarcerations we have and the extraordinary Indigenous deaths in custody that we have, how is it that these get erased?
Absolutely. And indeed, we were actually trying to get hold of Dr. Hannah McGlade to come on today, and she was unable to make it. And I spoke with Bronwyn about some of this too. So it's really fantastic that you were able to come on today because these things did need to be said today, Joseph.
Absolutely. And so then what we can do is to show they're not uncanny, these parallel deaths. What happened to David Dungay? I imagine that your readers, your listeners are familiar with the story, but basically it was correctional officers who killed him by undue restraint, by undue force, and by not putting their one of their knees on his neck, but by putting them on one of the knees on his back while he was like in a prone position on a bed, and was already quite unresponsive. But basically, he also died from asphyxiation and from the unnecessary cell transfer at Long Bay Jail, where he was being held in the medical hospital of all places. In the course of being forcefully transferred out of his original cell because he refused to give up a packet of biscuits, which for the guards constituted a medical emergency not, because we had the doctors and the medical personnel all say during the coronial inquest that there was no medical emergency, and in effect this was fabricated by the guards to cover their asses. In the process of being forcibly transferred between one cell and the next, he was held in prone positions, could not breathe, and called out 27 times, "I cannot breathe." So by the end of, say, 10, 15 minutes, he was also dead, as in a similar manner to George Floyd. So we've got these parallel structures. Absolutely. Now, the other parallel structures that we've got, which are particularly disturbing, are the issues of immunity. And I'm not sure if your previous speakers, when we had the findings of the coronial inquest handed down, broached this. But the family lawyer for the Dungay family basically said, up and down the line, undue force and restraint was exercised and applied on David's person. And this was the reason why he died. Yes. And so the Dungay family lawyer basically said, we need to refer this to the Director of Public Prosecutions because we see that there's an indictable crime here. And the coroner says, well, actually, the correctional officers gave evidence on the understanding that they would be given some sort of immunity for a certificate of exemption, he called it. It's Section 615, preventing their evidence from being used against them except in relation to criminal proceedings, in relation to the falsity of their evidence. So the upshot was that he said, he's not going to pursue this as an indictable offence because they've been issued these certificates of exemption, and thus it would be unfair procedure to go down that line. So none of these officers will ever be brought to trial or convicted for murder of David Dungay.
It's an ongoing cycle, isn't it, Joseph?
And you've got the parallel case with that issue of qualified immunity that I talked about, where time and again you've got white police officers in particular killing black women and men there, but because of the ruse of qualified immunity, they get off time and again, so that it's almost impossible to prosecute them in the court of law. So you can see now these transnational parallels in which, and this is the key point, the criminal justice system with the apparatus of the police are actually the agents of killing, and they know they can kill with impunity because they've got these legalised systems of immunity in place, whether we're talking about the US or Australia. And that's all happening within a white supremacist, settler state, racialised frame, which, as you know, is what deathscapes has been trying to map up and down the line. The transnational relations of force and violence that operate both in the US context as a settler state and the Australian context as a settler state.
It's very hard to believe, isn't it, that this is happening in so-called modern Australia, 25 years after the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure if you saw or heard David Dungay's nephew, Paul Silva, who was present throughout the course of the coronial inquest, but it's worth me citing what he had to say because it knits together so eloquently and movingly the connections between the US killing of George Floyd and the Australian killing of David Dungay. He says, it's plain and simple. The use of force was a contributing factor to David's death. If you take that use of force out, would David Dungay still be alive today? Yes, he would. Ditto with George Floyd. And then he says, when I heard him say, George Floyd, I can't breathe, for the first time I had to stop it, the video. My thoughts really go out to the family and everyone on the streets in the USA. My solidarity is with them because I do know the pain they are feeling. And as for Aboriginal deaths in our backyard, it's not in the public as much as it should be, which is what we've been talking about.
Absolutely, and we definitely do need to bear witness to all this.
Well, I think we need to do more than bear witness. We need to be active in calling for structural change within the legal system and within the whole settler framework within which that legal system is nested, because as we can see, the legal system actually becomes complicit and generative of police killings, of the exorbitant deaths in custody of Indigenous people. And as we've remarked on before, in a sense it becomes a fulfilment of the processes of elimination of Indigenous people from their own country through ongoing incarceration and police and correctional officers killing of Indigenous people in their custody.
The Doing Time show actually interviewed David's mother. I believe it would have been last year sometime, and she was distraught on air, Joseph. Absolutely distraught.
She was, and she's distraught now. She's basically said, if you read Lorena Allen's article in The Guardian, she says, we have been re-traumatised in watching the killing of David Floyd because it has brought everything back, because there was no closure for them at the close of the coronial inquest, because the findings basically said, well, we just need to do some training of correctional officers and medical officers at Long Bay, and that will solve the problem. And so no one will be charged, no one will be brought to trial, no one will be brought to book for the murder of David. So that whole family has been left hanging, thirsting for justice and knowing it won't be forthcoming.
It's not the first time, is it?
It's not. There's a string. Since the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, not one police officer, not one correctional guard has ever been charged for an Indigenous death in custody in this country.
It'll be very interesting to see, Joseph, with the American experience, whether that will follow suit. And there were 4 officers, weren't there? Altogether?
There were, and only one has been charged at this point.
But at this point, isn't it just second-degree murder?
It is. It's a manslaughter, effectively. And I just find that, I shake my head in disbelief because you can see someone with willful intent keeping his knee on someone's throat for 8 minutes. If that doesn't constitute someone willfully asphyxiating someone, I don't know what does.
Why didn't the other policemen stop him?
Well, this is interesting too, because in my research on this, one of the other police officers has also had a string of complaints about police violence. I think his name is Teo. And so you've got this, and Uncle Ray used to talk about this, that circle of complicity within the police force, whether it be in the US or in the Australian context, where they basically paper over the violence that they perpetrate. As with the correctional guards in the David Dungay case, unforgettably, during all of the sorts of analyses that were being made in the court during the coronial inquest, they just kept saying, I don't recall. And they could walk away with that, which was an outrage.
It is an outrage, and like you said, Joseph, and I think we better reiterate that on air for our listeners, and that is that the media really hasn't reported on this thoroughly, has it?
No, it hasn't. And it hasn't reported on it thoroughly because you see that systematically by the reporters themselves saying, we don't understand what race hate and police violence mean. We don't have it in this country, as that Channel 9 reporter said. And so it becomes something that happens overseas. It's anomalous to the Australian experience, and it's comprehensible to white people. And that is because there isn't a systemic campaign on behalf of the Australian media putting this front and centre. And this is what Uncle Ray would have said time and again when you interviewed him. The ongoing exorbitant incarceration of Indigenous people and their ongoing exorbitant deaths in custody should be the central point of concern for this nation before we move anywhere forward.
In fact, I'm just having a look here, Joseph, as we're speaking. The Aboriginal activist and award-nominated rapper Adam Briggs was furious.
Yeah.
And he was very upset with the Channel 9 reporter, and he tweeted that Australians did have the understanding of the history of police killings. And he said how embarrassing people in Australia, they do have an understanding, he was saying.
Of course they do, but there's denial there and erasure. And it basically, if you're referring to the article that I read by Briggs, he basically says we thus self-represent ourselves as the lucky country because we construct this fiction that we aren't a country built on a violent history, that we aren't a country built on race hate, that we aren't a country built on the institutions of power of white supremacism that ensure the reproduction of settler regimes of law that actually work to kill and incarcerate Indigenous people and remove them from their own country, remove them from their families, break up the culture.
Yeah. It's really sad, actually.
Well, I think that there's a gross irresponsibility on behalf of the Australian media, but I think it's a calculated responsibility because once you put that front and centre, the issue of Aboriginal deaths in custody and the exorbitant incarcerations, well, then you need to do something. You unsettle the settler state, and you need to begin to call it to account, and you need to begin to ask why there is such a systemic killing process in train in this country. Whereas if you don't put it front and centre, then you can claim that fake innocence and say it doesn't happen here. How come it's happening in the US?
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about and certainly a lot of work to do in terms of building the movement to stop Aboriginal deaths in custody.
Absolutely, and that's where I think we need to work in coalition. And I think, one of the most important moments when I was covering for Deathscapes, the David Dungay coronial inquest, was when Hawk Newsom, one of the leaders of the African-American Black Lives Matter, came out and expressed his solidarity with the Dungay family and said, we understand these processes of systemic violence. They are racialised to their bootstraps. We need to work together. And Black Lives Matter encompasses transnationally all black lives and people of colour. And so I think those coalition movements need to be transnational, and we also need to own, within the Australian context, the specificity, the particular historical ground upon which we, as settlers or migrants, come to this country, and the way in which we need to begin to take into account the structures within which we're caught and reproducing.
That's exactly right. So, Joseph, with the Deathscapes website, does that cover deaths in custody all over the world or just Australia?
No, it covers deaths in custody in the US and Canada. So it looks at three international sites and maps the transnational connections. And it also looks at the refugee deaths in the UK and the EU, because we included them because really they are the origin points for a lot of these settler states. They're the origin points of empire, effectively, that constituted the birth of the US, Canada and Australia as settler states.
Joseph, I'm really glad that you could actually come on today to discuss all of this, because I was quite outraged as a broadcaster when I saw all this media coverage. And I feel that 3CR really has cutting-edge media, and we needed to really report the real issues of what was happening with black deaths in custody. So thank you so much for coming onto the show and talking about it.
You're most welcome, Marissa, and it's so important to have your radio station covering these events and basically trying to push against the program of fake innocence and misrepresentation that we're seeing by the mainstream media. So 3SCR is more vital to us than ever.
Absolutely. And we certainly have gone up to half an hour of coverage, so we've achieved our goal. And thank you so much, Joseph, for coming onto the show. And Uncle Ray Jackson would be very proud, I think, to hear all this.
And please let me say that I really invite your listeners to visit the Deathscapes site, and also Sivendrini Pereira and I wrote an analysis of the coronial findings of the David Dungay inquest, so they might want to read that if they want follow-up. But there's a lot there, and a lot of Uncle Ray there in our site too, tackling these sorts of issues.
Could you just read out the website in full?
Yeah, so it's deathscapes, all one word, .com.org. Deathscapes.com.org. Yeah.
Joseph, thank you so much, and take care of yourself. Stay safe in this pandemic.
Thank you. You too. Lovely to speak with you, Marissa. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
G'day, my name is Margie Thorpe. You are listening to 3CR Community Radio 855 on your dial.
I really am not understanding why people aren't seeing the fact that prisons are an integral part of a public health response to a pandemic. Like you, I'm really concerned about whether the data is being released very honestly about illnesses within prison. I have suspicions it's not, but really we need very strong leadership in this country that actually cares about people inside, our most vulnerable populations inside. That's what we need, and that's not what we're getting right now.
3CR, your station in struggle and solidarity.
To donate, go to 3cr.org.au.
And you're back with the Doing Time show. And that was actually a lovely announcement with Tabitha Lean, who was reading out poetry for us, I believe, last week, and looking at the donations during the station appeal. So, but before we speak to Mitch from the Refugee Action Collective about Sertico, and that is actually another issue which we need to talk about. Just wanted to quickly in a way, quickly talk about the appeal. Donate to keep radical and independent community radio on air for another year. And it is important that although many of you are doing it tough, there is a call out for donations for those of you who can afford it. If you can, please dig deep to ensure that 3CR stays alive and thrives. And to everyone, stay safe and keep connected to your local community radio station. And so, there is actually a medium to donate online. And basically it's incredible to reflect on the extraordinary amount of change that's occurred since the onset of COVID-19. And we've seen whole communities in lockdown, the desiccation of the world economy, huge levels of unemployment and significant breaches of democratic practice and unprecedented pressure put on the capitalist system. And we've spoken quite a lot on this show about increased police powers and what's happening about eroding the right to protest. And we've spoken a lot about refugees and asylum seekers too, and about the impacts of how they could be severely affected by COVID-19. But on the line now we've got Mitch from the Refugee Action Collective, and we're going to be speaking to him about a recent media release that was put out about Sertico and Home Affairs denying art supplies to detained refugee. Hello, Mitch. Welcome to the program.
Hi, how's it going?
It's lovely to have you. So, Mitch, I'm wondering if you could just talk about what's been happening with this particular situation.
Yep, so essentially this refugee, his name's Farhad Bandesh, has been brought to Australia under the Medivac legislation to the Mantra Hotel. Those of us in Melbourne might be familiar with that's a place of detention where refugees currently detained, brought here for medical treatment but not receiving it. This particular refugee was involved in political protest against that treatment and appears to have been punished by the government, by the agencies for it. And so he was transferred, at night from the Mantra Hotel to the Melbourne Immigration Transit Accommodation Detention Centre, and then subsequently denied access to some of his personal effects, which includes his art supplies and, these types of things. It's obvious, it's just a targeted attack on a refugee who's been involved in protesting the treatment.
That is, because I know that we did interview Chris Breen about the Mantra Hotel and also a number of other people and what happened there. And in fact, there's a lot of people being detained there, haven't there? It's a hotbed of coronavirus there.
Yeah, there's been people detained at Mantra Hotel since they were moved from the Medivac legislation.
So this man, what's his name? Farhad, pronounce it for me, please, Mitch.
Bandesh.
So Bandesh was forcibly removed from the Mantra Hotel to Mita, over 3 weeks ago. And they still continue to deny him access to his personal effects, including art supplies. And why is this? Is this an act of punishment for taking a public stand for his rights on the Manus Island refugee prison in the Mantra Hotel?
Yeah, I think definitely. Farhad's been one of the prominent refugees in terms of resisting treatment within the detention centres and places where they've been detained. And, the circumstances are very suspect about why exactly he's being denied some of these items, whereas other refugees aren't necessarily. And so, we feel very strongly that the public sort of embarrassment of the government and the attempts to build up a movement for justice for refugees against Liberal and Labor policy has meant that the government and the agencies responsible have decided to, essentially take adverse action. He's since updated his Facebook as well to say that they're no longer allowing him to use his computer as well, which he also does art on. So it's sort of
he can't use his computer now.
Yeah, that's what he said on his Facebook. Yeah, he says they're not allowing him to have his computer.
What can be done about this, Mitch?
Well, I think the crucial thing is we've got to build up a political movement which can, really take the fight to the government as all the people who accept this sort of type of treatment. Now, there's limited things that you can do, for particular cases and stuff like that, and we can go out and we can speak to it and try and apply political pressure as much as possible with individual cases. But ultimately, I think this is outcome that's based off a broader system, and that system is designed to punish people for seeking asylum.
I think the important thing that listeners need to remember here is that other people are allowed to have their property, and this particular man isn't allowed to have the property just all because he's speaking up against these cruel policies.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. It's and certainly the move from being detained in the Mantra Hotel to the conditions of MITRE, is a particular thing. Is they want to break up, refugees who are leading politically from the rest of the population, and try and sort of stymie any kind of resistance or any kind of public stuff. So I think and then it becomes a question of, essentially blackmail. It's sit down, shut up, and, maybe, we'll do you a favour type thing. So the conditions are highly repressive. It's important, I think, to recognise that exactly as you say.
Indeed it does. And in fact, this man's removal from the Mantra was done under cover of darkness, wasn't it? Yeah,
it was during the night. You've got no idea what's happening or where you're going or anything like that. It wasn't this orderly type thing. So it's clearly they want to make people scared as well. I think that's a real major thing. They want people to feel like they're under the thumb of the screws and all of that. And this particular case is a specific particular sort of intense kind of act to do that.
Absolutely. Mitch, thank you so much for coming onto the program and talking about this situation. And we're going to be keeping an eye on this and continually reporting about the rights of asylum seekers and refugees. And during this pandemic, it has actually become a lot worse, hasn't it? Yeah,
totally. The refugees are very worried because, there's so much, held to the whims of guards and so on. And, they've got no idea where, guards are going, whether they're taking responsible, social distancing or anything like that. They're in close proximity while they're working. They're in close proximity with one another and with the refugees. They do room searches. They do all sorts of shit is obviously, going to create anxieties and, things like that are even further from the situation of detention itself. One of the things Farhad has said about the detention system as a whole is that I can't handle the fences, they're killing me. It's just absolutely cruel. He calls the system a cruel hell. And this is no way to treat people at all, I think, in any circumstance. And, the fact that it's against, some of the most vulnerable people in our society is, obviously a real condemnation on all those who support it.
Yeah, because he says after 7 years they still want to make us suffer any way they can. We are all sick. We need to be free. We have been tortured and tortured. They must remove us from this cruel hell.
Yeah, exactly. It's disgusting, like the way that people are being treated. And then the coronavirus, obviously, brings that forward. All the existing oppressions and fears, and brings it up to new heights, I think.
Absolutely. And Mitch, we also have to keep an eye on what's going to be happening with the right to protest. They have lifted some of the restrictions. It'll be very interesting to see what the government and the police do in regards to hopefully not expanding these powers.
Yeah, I think exactly. It's not totally clear exactly. Like, it seems like, because of the restrictions being lifted, there's sort of a less heavy-handedness to, fine every single individual who attends a demonstration. We organised a demonstration outside Mantra Hotel in mid-May, and as far as we are aware, nobody was fined then. We were sort of abiding by the restrictions and, keeping the demonstration safe. We're organising as well a demonstration on the 13th of June as well, one outside the Mantra Hotel, where, a number of those refugees are still held, as well as one outside MITA, where Farhad currently is. It's at 2 o'clock on Saturday, June the 13th. So I'd encourage everyone to come along. We're going to, organise it to be safe and socially distanced as much as possible. And it seems like the risk of fines is diminished compared to our first demonstration.
Thank you, Mitch, for telling us that. And in fact, if listeners want to get more details, they can actually go ahead to the Refugee Action Collective website. What's that website, Mitch?
It is rac-vic.org. You can also have a look at the Facebook page as well, which is Refugee Action Collective Victoria.
Mitch, thanks so much, and it was great to have you. We're now going to be going on to Brett Collins from Justice Action to talk about deaths in custody. I'm hoping we can have you back very soon, Mitch.
Yeah. No, that sounds good. I'm happy to come back if you like.
Thanks a lot.
Update. Yep.
Yeah, and we'll give you a link to our podcast. Thanks so much.
Yep. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
You're listening to 3CR Community Radio 855 AM on digital and online. 3CR Radical Radio.
COVID-19 is a sickness that can spread from person to person. It can be dangerous, especially for our elders or people who are already unwell. We can all help stop the spread in our communities. Cover a cough with the inside of your elbow instead of your hand. Wash your hands with soap for at least 20 seconds after you cough or sneeze. Go to the toilet and before you make any food. Keep away from people who are sick, coughing or sneezing. Avoid going to places where there are lots of people. At this time, it is best to stay at home and away from other people as much as we can. If you're feeling unwell, have a fever, cough or sore throat, or worried about someone else, phone your doctor, clinic or medical service right away for advice. It is important to stay connected and strong as a community and keep our mob safe. Visit health.gov.au or your local health service for more information.
Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
A 3CR supporter.
And if you've just tuned into the Doing Time show, this is 3CR Community Radio, and we're going to be speaking very shortly with Brett Collins. We were running a little bit late, but before we do that, just a reminder to everybody to donate to the station Appeal. For nearly 45 years, 3CR has fought for change. Through our program content, we advocate and agitate for social and political justice. And through our organisational model, we represent how radical independent media can give power to communities. So head to the 3CR website if you can afford it. I know times have been tough. www.3cr.org.au and donate to the Doing Time show or to all shows at 3CR. And coming up now is Brett Collins from Justice Action, who's going to be talking a little bit about George Floyd and David Dungay. Hello, Brett. Welcome to the program.
Yes. Good afternoon, Marissa.
It's been a very busy show. Sorry about keeping you on hold for that long.
No, that's fine. Not a problem. I could hear the excitement coming out of refugees as well, so that's very
yes,
encouraging.
Yes, a lot of stuff going on here. Brett, tell us what Justice Action's position is in regards to black deaths in custody and indeed in regards to what happened with George Floyd.
Oh, look, we're so angry. I mean, the connection between what happened to George and what happened to David Dungay is just like it's the same. It just shows you that they don't care. They quite clearly don't care. And so Trump to be standing up there and talking about the shootings, right, in behind trying to defend property against people's anger. It just says what it's all about. You know, the greedy, selfish, don't care, and the deaths of people whom they control, right, control with the force of police forces and racially directed power. The deaths that occur as a response to that are inevitable, and the anger is essential. It's an essential part of it. So we feel inspired by the anger that's happening across the United States. The same anger. It's the same anger that we feel regarding the death of David Dungay, the Aboriginal young man who died in Long Bay Prison Hospital, and about which we've all been talking. He's the man who was held down, knees in his back, and he said, "I can't breathe." He said 12 times, and he died. They suffocated me, and they killed him.
It really is a dreadful thing, Brett. And we were speaking earlier on actually to Joseph Pugliese, who's you would have heard about the deathscapes website. And he was talking a lot about all these issues. And I felt like I just wanted to invite you onto the show just to hear you comment on it too.
Well, look, absolutely. Well, look, from our point of view, really, it comes down to an awareness, first of all, an acceptance that there is an obligation on any agent of the state, and that's police force, that's prison corrective services, that's also inside the psychiatric units, the guards, the security guards in there. Now, there's an obligation on all those people, and because they act on behalf of the state, they have to be properly trained, and they have to have a special privilege, but with that's an obligation as well. So that training is essential, and also learning the lessons of situations which have caused deaths in the past. That's essential, and the responsibility has to be sheeted home to the managers themselves and to the governments who actually pay those people, and that's currently not happening.
Absolutely. And what's the website of Justice Action, Brett?
Well, sorry, what's that? What again?
Could you just read out the website for listeners so they can head there and have a look?
Okay, so it's sure. No, it's www.justiceaction.org.au. So we're up there, and deaths in custody is one of the central things that we're coming in behind. It really comes down to if you have people isolated, held by the state, and controlling the environment entirely. Now, that's a special vulnerability of the citizens in that space, and there's a special obligation of governments to ensure that that's done properly. So what happened to George Floyd, in some ways, is the same thing as it happened to David Dungay and many other hundreds of people. And that is a total lack of concern for the person whom a much bigger man with fully armed, or woman for that matter, I'm sure it happens there too, holds down a vulnerable person, and the way they subject them to power and force, and in the process have killed many people. And just might I say that at that stage too, so what we've embarked after the David Dungay inquest and recommendations, we then looked very carefully at what was happening, what had happened in the past with similar situations around Australia, and it was very interesting. Interesting, made us extremely angry to find out that there were people who had died in exactly the same situation up in the Northern Territory and also in Queensland, where the coroners had actually said that the people should not be held in these ways. But it meant that only that the coroner in Northern Territory had distributed that material to the correctional services in Northern Territory, and likewise in Queensland, they didn't distribute it to all the other jurisdictions. And so we've come in very closely in behind that, and have been in contact with each of the coroners in each of the jurisdictions, and proposed to them a national database to make sure that all coroners' recommendations that affect all areas of jurisdiction have got to be distributed, and that the people, authorities who have control are forced to respond and to make sure that they follow the recommendations.
It's interesting too, Brett, that in America there seems to have been a lot of reports coming out of all this saying that there are terrorists and that, a lot of people are using this to spread chaos, which is ridiculous, really, because I don't think that's true.
No, absolutely not. No, that's an outrageous position. No, look, there's
it
no
is outrageous.
Yes, for sure. Look, for people not to be angry when you've got a vulnerable man held down the way he was. We could all see it. We could see what happened. And
the footage was there, loud and clear. Yeah.
Oh, well, look, it was quite clear what occurred. And I think just the starkness of it, the fact that it was captured, and these things are captured now by members of the public and distributed straight away, that's a very important part of the public involvement in community policing of police. And I think that's really good. Community policing of the agencies.
Yeah, and police investigating police. Yeah. Brett, thank you so much. We're nearing the end of our show. Sorry to cut you off, but we'll be having you back pretty soon anyway.
Lovely. Good to speak with you again.
But before you go, just wanted to send out a very quick cheerio to all of Justice Action and the beautiful work they do, and also a cheerio to Peter and Rob, who are also a part of this show, and they've made it possible to help me, with producing and research, because we're doing a lot of remote work from home. And a big thank you to 3CR staff as well for extra assistance.
Good, thank you indeed.
Lovely to have you, Brett, and we'll talk very soon.
Lovely, look forward to it. Thank you, Melissa.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You're listening to 3CR Community Radio 855 AM.
Throughout the month of June, 3CR is running a station appeal.
We're asking you, the listener, to donate to keep the station going.
3CR relies on the support of our listeners, but we know that many of you are doing it hard. So if you can't, we get it.
But if you can, head to 3cr.org.au to make your tax-deductible donation to the 3CR station appeal.
And you're back with the Doing Time show. It's approximately 4:53, and I've done my best to really give out a call out to the station appeal. Old habits die hard. Not sure if I'm actually doing it right, given that I'm used to doing radiothon. But but it's all good. And see if you can keep those donations coming anyway for the month of June. It's approximately 4:53, and I wanted to thank our guests for coming onto the show. Wanted to thank Brett Collins and also Joseph Pugliese and also Mitch, speaking about a number of issues. And I think what's important to keep in mind here is that black deaths in custody is alive and well, pardon the pun, and we do need to build the movement to stop all deaths in custody. And some of the appalling media coverage that has come out, in particular with Channel 9, has actually sparked a lot of outrage by activists in both America and Australia. It's approximately 4:54 and we've got about 3 minutes left. So, if you can, please dig deep to ensure that 3CR stays alive and thriving. And, we do need to make sure that things change. History tells us that change is determined by political struggle. 3CR is part of that struggle. Critiquing existing structures, amplifying new voices and visions, and we need your help to keep going. And we're going to be going out pretty soon with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella, from the Rumpy Band. And stay strong and stay safe in this pandemic and lockdown. And already we see the tremendous response of local communities supporting each other. It's been called a new kindness pandemic. But supporters of 3CR already know the transformative power of community action for a better world. And with your help, we are confident we can weather these hard times and continue to be Melbourne's radical, independent and community-owned broadcaster. So how's that for a send-off for the show? I think it's okay, even if I do say so myself. Approximately 4:55, and we've got about 2 minutes before our show ends. We're going to be going out, as I said before, with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella, from the Warumpi Band. Stay safe, everybody, and be kind to each other, and we will get out of this pandemic. Thanks so much. Stay tuned every Monday from 4 to 5 for the Doing Time show. Bye. Take care.
As long as you a true fella, as long as you a real